Sir, I hope we are live.
We are good.
I'm just let me check out once. One minute, sir. I'll just change the setting. Okay, we are done. So, welcome, sir. So today we are having with us, as we all know, and most of many of in my Facebook page, they were like writing lots and lots about that how excited they are to see you, because you generally you are not available in social media or anywhere that easily accessible. Rather, even in I have searched YouTube for any video with your tag name, but I could not find. So very elusive kind of thing. So many people have written to me that they are very happy to see you. So before we start, sir, I know it will be very futile to give any introduction for you, so I will skip that part totally, and because that I don't dare to do. So but sir, today, as we you know that our topic is like history of Indian or the region's herpetology, and how it has come to the point that it is now. And I know that history would be incomplete if we do not have you as a bridge between the old and modern era. So thank you, sir, for enriching the whole dimension of herpetology in India and South and Southeast Asia. Welcome, sir, and thank you for giving your time.
Thank you, Jadito. New experience for me as well, and I'm very happy to meet all your all our virtual friends. Yeah.
Yes. So, sir, I had this small questions like because I just went through your list of publication, and I found that it is now already 540 that is published, and some are in review and some are in preparation. So, sir, do you still remember before, because we are talking about history? So I'll just go back with little bit of your history. And do you remember the first paper you wrote?
Yeah, I unfortunately, yes, I do. It's about finding a salamander while
Uh,
on holiday from school in Shillong.
okay.
That was, I think, published in the year 1984, if you can call it a
Ye-
publication.
yes, yes. I see that. That is in 1984 in Hamadryad.
Yes.
So, sir, because publications are important, but can you tell me, because the many of here, those who are here, many of are in process of going for publication or have one or two publication, because our target group is that group. So, sir, what instigated you the first time that instigated you to write the paper? Because many of us, like when I started, I did not have any knowledge what is paper. I only knew newspaper. So what is that all about that you thought of writing, or what was the concept behind, and how you conceptualize the whole process?
That was a very simple observation, and Hamadryad those days used to be a very simple newsletter. So, in my
Okay.
excitement, I wanted to share this with everyone. And
Okay.
Hamadryad was the only place that would publish such notes.
Okay.
And it was just a simple observation, and I think you don't need to be in even in university to write an observation. Yeah, so it's
So I
simple.
still remember, sir, because the first time I wrote my publication was a small note that was you were the editor, and you corrected the note. It was in 2009, and it was an invasive species of Hemidactylus flaviviridis from Assam. So that was so I was very excited, and that is why I just asked you. And sir, then if I go a little forward in your timeline, do you remember, sir, when was the first time you described? Because most of us, for most of us, when we are very beginning of the research, describing a species is like an iconic feat. Like we have done something which is like keep us there for in the history of herpetology or whatever research. So do you remember when you described the first species and what was the species?
Yeah, I think the first one was a snake that Rom brought me. And he said,
Okay.
"Hey, this is a new boa, perhaps. Why
Okay.
don't you deal with it?" And then
Uh-huh.
he disappeared into the jungle. So, unfortunately, there was no idea what to do. So I had to read, and finally, of course, only two species in India to compare with at that time. So
Hmm.
it was finally named after Rom Whitaker, Eric's Whitakeri,
Hmm.
and yeah, that's how it started.
But in your chronological order,
Yeah.
because I have seen your publication, maybe that is the first publication, but in your chronological order in the CV, it says that it was a Mabuya.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. Around the same time,
Yes,
there is yeah, Gansai. I think
yes,
you
yes,
Gansai. Yeah,
1991.
yeah, yeah. So I think GBNH's dates of publication and dates of receipt and date of acceptance, there was a huge time difference.
Okay,
So Whitakeri was written much earlier and accepted much earlier, but
okay.
may have been
So,
published later.
so, sir, now it's from 1984 to now it's like 2020. So it's a long time that you have invested of your life in the field of herpetology, or so as to say, a big chunk of your research deals with that. So, at the very beginning, I just wanted to know, as many of us had this similar question, why herpetology?
So I have seen some reactions of people in the past when I have asked them, like, or when others have been asked, how do you get interested? And there's always, there was one day I did this, and suddenly it's like a eureka moment. But
Hmm.
in my case, it's right from walking with my mother holding her hand. I remember having a very deep interest in frogs, in lizards, in turtles. So there wasn't a time when I wasn't interested. So it's very hard to know, to tell you when, what date what specific occasion. Yeah.
So this brings me to the fact that great minds think alike. Because when I asked the same question to Aaron Bauer, sir,
Yeah.
he exactly replied in the same way that uh, it was not by chance, but it was like when he was in very young age. In Long Island, he used to see lots of snakes, and he was initially interested in snakes and slowly in geckos then. So it was like great mind thinks alike. So I can say that. So
One great one.
yeah, but then you won't. You are too modest to say about yourself. But let us judge that, and we say that great minds, both of you think alike. And sir, like many of the most important aspect that I find very interesting to in your research is I see people working in like as for Aaron Bauer, if I say that he is working in lizards or geckos, then I see people working on turtles, and then I see some people working on frogs, a group. But I see you. The most interesting part of your research is you have almost described every uh, every group of reptile or amphibians. So that is
Except
a hell. Yes, sir.
except crocodiles.
Except crocodiles, yes. So it's a it's really, because if you are working with geckos, so if you keep reading on geckos, and if you are in a streamline, as to say, like for example, if I now have to read about mabuya, I have to go to again zero, very basic, and I have to know which are the distinguishing characters, because for geckos the distinguishing characters are different, mabuya distinguishing character are different, frogs again according to genera the distinguishing character, families distinguishing character, so you have to keep on reading. So what made you like deal with all the groups of herpetofauna?
It is easy if you're interested. You can learn 100 languages if you're interested. And if you're
True,
not interested, you will not even do one taxonomic group.
true,
So
but
yeah, and same goes for you as well, young Jayadit. I've
so,
seen your videos
no,
at cover
my,
every group.
so sir, what I was like asking you, because the origin of the question is, uh, like for frogs and all, like uh, there is a total set of different set of uh, protocols, and then for amphibian reptiles there is a very different set of protocols, and then you are very interested in frog calls as well, so you have contributed a lot in that dimension. So my question is, do you think, like given a chance, if you have to go back and if you have to think, which group in this whole is your favorite? Like, you have done many, but which is your personal favorite?
Um, it's not a group that is my favorite, but I like life histories, understanding life histories of animals. So it can be a turtle or a frog or a snake, but their activities, that's what is really interesting for me. So, and in terms of this, the greatest diversity, of course, is in the biggest groups, which is lizards and frogs, and less so in turtles and crocs, fewer species, and snakes maybe, but we don't know anything or nearly nothing about natural history. So I would say, yeah, it's the natural history trigger which keeps me going.
So, sir, before we start off with a presentation, I also want to know, because this is a very relevant question, and I found you to be the best, one of the best person to answer this. Like, uh, I recently got through a paper now, because in recent past I have seen lots of species are being described at micro level. Some of them are maybe morphologically very identical and maybe very hard to distinguish in field, but still though, through other techniques they are being established. And then recently a paper came which says that there will be time in the because this decade was all about description of new species, like last 10 years lots and lots were described, and the next 10 years it may be a decade of synonymy. There is a chance, because that paper suggests that, because lots of things which are maybe the way that has been looked into may need a re-evaluation. So what do you think of, like, so many species are being described? What is your standpoint on, like, so many, is it worth it, or we need to go to back to the classical things?
You're talking about cryptic species which cannot be
No. Yes,
visually.
and yes, and there are many species which are like mostly genetically they are separated, and actually the thing was like initially, to make my point clear, I see two species are little different, and then I do molecular thing, and then it established the fact that these are two species. Now here the things are turning upside down, where you do molecular sequence and you see that okay, these are two separate groups, and now you start looking for morphological difference to establish the species. So is it worthwhile?
So current standards is certainly worthwhile. Future, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe we'll go back to the linear system. So I think it's worthwhile doing what's standard for the day rather than
Okay,
worry what's going to come tomorrow.
okay. So like for example, now I have just a very basic question. Like, if you, sir, because a very question that I ask most of the people that I get a chance to ask, because this question is very critical for all the taxonomists, and I believe many of us are really wanting to listen to that answer, is what, according, because I know it's perspective based, so what according to you constitutes a species?
We have so many species concepts, but most of them cannot be tested. So, in the end, what is a species depends on the person. A morphologist would look at morphological characters and say this is a distinct species from another one. A geneticist would look at a divergence percentage, maybe 3%, 5%, and claim it's another species, distinct species. So, almost like religion, I say, species description, and you can never agree with another person who has another species concept. It almost attacking his god.
It's a nice
So the
way, yeah.
minimum, the minimum requirement is, as long as you can convince the editor of the journal, it is valid species for the time being.
Okay, that's a very nice way to put, as long as we can convince the editor or at least confuse them.
Mhm.
So, sir, with that note, I'll go a little bit to your slide that you presented me with, and I'll just go through the slides, and you can just guide me. And after this slide, which deals with little bit of herpetology conservation thing, we will go to the history of herpetology. That's what is the core topic of today. So we'll go to the slide A first. So I'm just restarting, sir.
Sure.
Here we go. So you can just guide me, sir, and I'll go through it. Can
So
you see, sir?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For me, it's fine. I hope everyone
Okay.
can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope.
So
Yeah.
yeah. I put together some of the aspects you've already asked me about, how I became interested, but then I
Yes.
move on to the current research, and
Yes.
I make a few announcements for young
Okay.
herpetologists in
Nice.
the region.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. So if you would, yeah. So let's start with my very humble background. I grew up, born and grew up in this great city of Calcutta, Kolkata, as we say, and very, very inspiring place to be for reasons I'll describe very shortly. Great mentors, great collections, great libraries. Next, please. And this is me. This is a photograph of a child catching frogs. My early activities. I used to go to my grandma's house in Assam. My
Okay.
grandma is Silchar.
Okay.
So I spend my holidays catching frogs and putting them in bottles as every
So,
child at that age.
sir, I am just tempted to ask who made this painting.
This is somewhere from some internet painting,
Okay.
but
Okay.
of course the landscape was different. It was full of forest those days.
But
So
the photograph on the horseback is you, right?
that is me. Yeah, when I was
And
5.
it matches. That's why I asked.
Yes.
So yes, sir. Continue,
Next,
please.
next, please. So then I studied in Don Bosco School in Calcutta, and the reason for showing this is at that time we were so small and the field looked very large, vast. Huh? But now when I went back, it doesn't look that big. But if you see the verges on the far wall, that's where I used to catch tadpoles. When I was in school, I used to chuck my lunch, and normally sandwiches, into the gutter and bring back tadpoles and little metamorphs and hoping I would keep them alive. Next, please.
Wow, that's great.
So thereafter, I had a good mentor. So I joined the Krog Bank. I was doing after my MSc, and a really hands-on experience with Rom Whittaker there. I was associated with them even now to this day, but I worked for almost 13 years with them. And maybe the highlight was, of course, Krog Bank handling every animal, but also if you see the picture on the lower left, that's the field center of ENET in Wandur in Andamans. So there we spent on and off about 2 years exploring the fauna. And it was like, I would say, one of the defining moments of my early professional life. And on the right, Rom and I had just found a king cobra in Kerala. Huh? This is in the year late 1980s. Do you have any rude remarks on this image? Yeah. No.
No, for me, yeah, no,
Yes.
not that, but we were just discussing that if you can illustrate about or you can extend that your aim of life at that point of time, apart from being an herpetologist, was also like you just discussed. Sir, can you discuss again?
Yes, at that time, my life's ambition was to become 50 kilos in weight. And now, past the age of 50, it's the same ambition.
Again, go back, retrogressive metamorphosis.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I go to the next slide.
So it's very good. We have internet to inspire us, but those days, no inspiration. There's no internet. There's no email, and so a very different kind of world, huh? But I was fortunate to have been inspired by some good people, and I went to Oxford. On the left is Trinity College, and then I worked as a postdoc at Harvard at the Museum of Comparative Zoology. So I did meet many good people, great people, I would say. Where at that time there was Stephen Jay Gould in Harvard and Richard Dawkins in Oxford. So great influence, and of course many good friendship made. Yes.
So you did your doctorate from University of Oxford and Fulbright Fellow of Harvard University, right?
That's right. Next.
We can just dream of that. Yeah.
And here's a French scientist, Jean Rostand. So very thought-provoking thing he said: theories past the frog remains. And so many theories. What is a species and what comprises different groups of animals and so many other evolutionary questions. But the animals we're studying will remain, huh? So this is the saying of Rostrand, and a stamp from Paris.
True.
Next. So basically, our research group will talk about, discusses or approaches research using an integrative framework, using different techniques to arrive at different answers to the questions we have. And certainly broadens your horizon, and in a tropical setting like here, it's very relevant. So yeah, you can go to the next one, please. So online, you can easily find us, the Herpetofauna research group. These are some past, present students and research associates. You can recognize maybe some of them.
Yes.
Yeah, next. So yeah, you can easily visit, you can download papers, you can see what's going on. attend some of our events next, please, or maybe
So,
apply to join us.
so in
As,
between, I just have to mention that before I go to the next slide, because here there is one thing known as stamp watch.
yes.
So I want to mention that you are also a Guinness record holder. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that, sir?
Yeah. So stamp is
Yes.
something very close to me, like amphibians and reptiles. And most child, not these days, but those days, they used to collect stamps and had stamp albums. And I'm one of the few, perhaps, who has retained this interest and have accumulated a very vast collection, and which I entered, and it was declared as the biggest collection of amphibian stamps. Not a great
So
achievement, but something
no, it's so
something
so
I treasure.
so, sir. What was the year that it was like you were certified?
But a couple of years ago,
Okay, and how many stamps do you have, sir, roughly?
not roughly. At the Guinness, they need a very precise measurement. They call it 1644 was the count at that time, and it says the certificate as well.
1644.
But thereafter, I've kept collecting, and now maybe 1,800 plus amphibian
So,
stamps.
can you, sir, contest your old Guinness record?
Yeah, you can break your own record.
Okay.
Yes, when you
Okay.
have like 25% more.
Okay, 25% more. Okay, great. Okay, so I move on to the next slide.
You can break my record also by
No,
having
no,
2,000 stamps. So yeah, okay. Back to science. So when I joined Unimas, one of the first projects we embarked on was what looked like a very simple inventory of frog larvae, amphibian larvae, tadpoles, polywogs, as they call, and was started with Alexander Haas from University of Hamburg in Germany. And of course, this project has grown, and many of my students are actually products of this project. And we've published, and we've created new websites, and many different products have come out of this project. If you go to the next one. So past researchers have a sketch of amphibian larvae, but using photography, we have been able to bring to the fore the great diversity and beauty of these little animals. And we have, of course, generated much new information on this. If you just go on for the next few slides, without commentary, you would see some of the papers, some of the work we've done, anatomy, ecology, and huge databases that have genetic data, location data, call, image data. So yeah, huge resource, thousands of tadpoles, and new character systems, which in the past wasn't possible. So of course, we're writing a book which should be ready in next couple of years. Been a 20-year journey. It's a very, very technical, specialized literature looking at tiny parts of tadpoles via dissection and SAMs. Yeah. So thereafter, some very cool research currently or in the recent past by students. So here is a recently completed project by friend and former student Tony Pine from the US. So he used sonar. We have a boat, and if you go to the next one, next slide would show you how Tony can detect both species and habitats underwater. So he mapped habitats and could ask all these questions looking at crocodilians and turtles underwater. So apparently the features underwater are more important, perhaps, than features that humans can see over the water body.
Correct.
So these are important research projects. We also have projects by others looking at amphibian acoustics at the landscape level. Here are a couple of my grad students, and there's several others, especially my student and now colleague Pu Young Min. He is coming soon. His image. So he is studying how amphibian calls characterize landscapes, or rather how landscapes are in turn characterized by frog calls, and what are the triggers and what it all means. We have two automated weather stations coupled to sound recorder stations. If you go to the next one. So song meter records the sound remotely and is used for a variety of different kinds of animals. Now there are even automated techniques for coding the calls, and these are set up, and all you need to go is visit, change batteries, do some maintenance, and download the calls, and there you have it, the whole information on calls without having to spend all that time in the forest. Of course, you
Time.
need to, for ground truthing, to know which frog it is. Yeah. Next, please. So this is coupled to a weather station, which also remotely collects information on weather parameters. Could be minimum, maximum temperature, RH, relative humidity, wind direction, canopy cover, and so on. So all useful for understanding what specifically triggers a frog to call. Next. So I think Pui did this, yes, the landscape, and where the two weather station is coupled to the song meter inside a hypothetical forest. And if you click on, you will see the sampling volume. Yes. So within a certain area, depending on the landscape, we have recording of those frogs that are calling there. So it also gives us an idea of comparative densities of calling amphibians, which probably over time will help us extrapolate amphibian populations. So next. So here are some questions. Pu Young Min, when he was a little young, the black and white image, and his co-supervisor, also our great friend, Ulmar Grafa, who is from Germany, but works in Brunei. And maybe interesting for Indians, he is completely, perfectly fluent in Tamil, having been raised in Kodaikanal. So he considers himself Indian, regardless of what others think of him. So Ulmar is an expert on acoustics, and together we are working on this project, which is Pui's PhD thesis. Next would be okay. So as we know, we are still, most of us, trying to figure out life histories of these animals, which are very secretive. Unlike birds, reptiles and amphibians don't show off. They are always hiding. So what can we do? Of course, we can do different kinds of techniques, and now possible, like starting with radio-telemetry. And of course, there are many other techniques, but telemetry is now affordable to allow research on fairly small animals. You'll see some examples. In our institute, there's of course research on tree shrews and tarsiers. Here's one example. And in my own research group, I have a very active group of young students studying lizards and one snake and turtle. And here are some work going on. Students and colleagues are putting transmitters. That's Josh, undergraduate student, who worked on monitor lizards using telemetry. And go to the next one. Yes.
Sir, in between, I'll just ask you this
Yes.
because many of Indians will be interested to know. Like each, I see in the Varanus that the device is plugged in. So what would be the basic cost of this unit?
All right. So each unit can be bought from companies in the US or Canada, and it's made to order. So based on the animal, they'll have to make it for you. They'll take a while to make it, and the costing of the unit itself maybe about $200 onwards. But just having one is not enough. Huh? A population
I know.
needs to be marked. Yes, so that would
Correct.
be a certain cost, and more than the transmitter, the cost of people being in the forest to record them
Many
and
times.
take data, that is a greater cost.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But privately, if anyone's interested, we can certainly share this information. Yeah.
Okay. Correct.
So there's a lot of different kinds of research going on, sometimes in collaboration. This is Aaron's grad student, Ben Karen, who came to study skinks, but did some work on thermoregulation and the earless monitor, which is endemic to Borneo, yeah, which we had in the lab. Yeah. So, and some other very cool squamate research, that's Veronica Martin, and she's studying the pit viper, Tropidolimus subannulatus. It's a decent sized, quite heavy, maybe like Malabaricus, the Malabar pit viper. So can certainly, adults can take a transmitter, and we know much. We can learn a lot about the movement, home ranges, and even thermoregulation and behavior from such studies. And the other two are cat gecko and that's a water skink, which is undergraduate projects of students still being written up. And you can see the placement to the transmitters. It works for a few weeks. These small animals mean small batteries, so we have to very rapidly get information on different aspects using these batteries, which die within 2 months or so. Next.
Correct.
So the longest study for us have been this by my PhD student, Baizura, Siti Baizura. She's just submitted her thesis. She studied this endangered, critically endangered turtle, Yosemite spinosa, which is maybe like Melanochylis trijuga sized animal. So this can easily take a very large transmitter, and it also has eye buttons, which is a device for recording internal, which is core body temperature, which was useful. Yeah, she found that there's no correlation between surface body temperature in turtles and the core body temperature, meaning some of the data we have taken from the carapace, it doesn't really reflect the body temperature of these animals. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, there are many other studies that can be done. And of course, the use of drones and remote sensing are very useful for some research, such as this crocodilian research. And also we found most recently for photography of landscapes where humans cannot access. So for mapping, for future surveys, drones can be useful. Yeah. Next, please. So this towards the end of this presentation, different kinds of integrative approaches, molecular, morphology, ecology, and so on. Some research outputs. More of that. And here, I'd like to tell you, you may know about this event. We hold this every year, not this year for obvious reasons. The International Bornean Frog Race coming up next year. Hopefully not a virtual one, a real one, a great fun 1 or 2 day event We get people from up to 17 different countries, and great prizes, talks. It's like a super carnival, huh? It's a must visit at least once a year, or once in your lifetime, if you
Lifetime.
it. Yes. And this is Jody from the last version. And in the year 2024, we have been awarded the right to host the 10th World Congress of Herpetology, which will be held in the beautiful city of Kuching in Sarawak. So, yes, everyone invited, please come. I want to see a huge contingent from Asia, and start saving. And hope to see you all here. Thank you.
So this was really sort of an eye opener for many of us, like to know that what are the modern techniques or device being used in basically herpetology. So also in between, I'll tell all of you, those who are tuned in or are listening to the whole program. So if you have question, we'll take the questions at the end of the program, and I'll also request you to put the question in a single comment rather than putting it into a multiple comment, which becomes problematic for us to take the question. So to now we'll go to the core issue of today that we really want to know, and there was a beautiful paper that the name I have taken from, that you wrote, herpetology of an antique land. So really, I believe the herpetology in this part has not only the herpetology is important, but the landmass where the herpetology is being done is also unique because of different, like for example, the Pangea, the concept like continental drift and some other things, and also because I found that many still I know that work has to be done. Like for example, when I talk about Northeast India in old literature that I look into, most of the time I find that Assam is written, and then this when the new modern checklists are being made, some high altitude species are shown in Assam. So that perhaps would have been somewhere in Arunachal, present day Arunachal in the hills. So these are some of the interesting facts that we need to, as a modern herpetologist, we also need to look into this type of political and biogeographical content of the region. So without further ado, we'll just go on to the next presentation. And in between, sir, if you want to say something.
No, I'm good. You want to start?
Okay, so we just go on to the next one, and this is I am very much interested in because I hope I'm on the right side. Yes. Can you see, sir?
Yeah.
Can you see the presentation, sir?
I can. I hope everyone can.
Yes. Yeah. So I think everyone can, sir.
Yeah. All right. Great. Shall I start very briefly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So the title, I purposely left it a little intriguing. Antique is not applied to land, but I copied it from a book written by my very famous friend, a bestseller, best-selling author, unlike me, Amitabh Ghosh, also from Calcutta and Oxford PhD. But of course, the book is about the antique land of Egypt. But I'd argue that ours is also an antique land full of history and full of ancient stuff, ancient people like me. ancient history of herpetology. So ours is truly an antique land. And with apologies to Amitabh, I would like to start this talk. So the talk mostly is from the paper that you referred to. And of course, Indians, unlike the Chinese, didn't leave much paper literature. The Chinese have a vast amount of literature on paper of scientific progress, but Indians have not. Maybe not a coincidence that paper was in fact invented by them. So,
Yes.
but yes, from many of our ancient texts preserved in palm leaf manuscripts and other sources, that there was good knowledge of amphibians and maybe reptiles at that time, as you will see from reading the Rig Veda. I don't claim I have, but I've read the English version. And next.
Okay.
So things become slightly better with the Mughal invasion, starting with the Battle of Panipat and Babur. And the Mughal emperors were good biographers, autobiographers and biographers, and left a lot of literature on what they did, what they saw. And I think it's essential reading for all herpetologists. The Babur Nama and Jahangir Nama has a lot of natural history. In fact, whole chapters on natural history, not just herbs, but birds and mammals, fish, and many of them probably are first records, you would say, of species and even behavior. For instance, Euphlyctus, the skittering behavior we used to remark at when we were kids, was noted 500 years ago by Babur. It'll be a nice herb review note. So, next. So Jahangir, very, very academic for his time, again, almost 500 years ago, he noticed a cobra swallowing another cobra. That's another herb review note. So these are things for people. If we grew up observing this every day, we would not think it's remarkable. But seeing them with fresh eyes, they realize these are very, very unusual things going on in this subcontinent. Next. Science, you can say, modern science as we understand now, started with the advent of the Europeans, and started the earliest descriptions started from paintings or preserved animals that landed up in Europe. And this is how some of the earliest Indian species, but we don't know where they came from, but species found in India were first described in books of Albertus Seba and a few others from that time. These are paintings, but later workers describe them. Yeah. So coming to the next slide is everyone's famous favorite herpetologist. It's Patrick Russell. This is while he was in Aleppo, which is now Syria. We did a special issue of Hamadryde. Aaron brought together papers.
Yeah.
So this is a fitting tribute to this doctor, medical doctor,
Yes.
who
Yes.
described, not described as we
Named.
use it, but literally described it without naming them, many species of snakes from the East Coast mostly. And accidentally, he also described a legless lizard, maybe thinking it's a snake. This is Barracudia. Yeah. So
which one, sir?
This is Barracudia.
Okay.
The Barracudia species. So that time, you would notice Linnaeus's work was published, but maybe the exchange of ideas between Europe, where Linnaeus was, and Russell, where he was in the boondocks, knowledge doesn't and literature didn't transmit fast enough. So
Internet
Russell,
was not there yet.
yes, unfortunately. So Russell used local names, and of course Telugu names, because he was based in the Coromandel coast. Um, he used those names to describe these species, but of course these images were excellent. In
Yes.
fact, 200 years later, we haven't even bettered his images. I think we still think. I think this is the greatest picture. So thereafter, all the material Russell and many others were collecting were landing up in Europe. We had no museums in Asia at that time, and these were the three famous the succession of British Museum curators: Gray, who hired Gunther, who hired Boulanger, who in fact were describing species. They must have been describing many species per day. From all over the world. How did they do that? I have no idea. They had no electricity, worked by gas lamp. Amazing contribution.
And because you just told this point, because most of the viewers today are seeing in live webcast, they are young. So I always ask this question, and I am also not far from making the same mistake again and again. But over the period of time, I am learning. So those people were like very, the science was not that easy as it is now. I believe because of technology and like for example, when I dig into manuscript, I know. Can you just a little bit tell me about how you procured the old manuscript? Because now Biodiversity Heritage Library has all the important old stuff, and Sci Hub has all the new stuff. So we are in the best age for digging into literature, but still literature reviews are not as good or as it should have been, because as at par the number of things are available with us. So what do you think are like in old days? These people, one communication took, I heard that this what like 6 months, 5 months to come, the results and discussion because of the post and all. So what do you think is the mindset of today's new generation of herpetology?
That is a very interesting question. But first, let's look at these people when they worked. They didn't have many journals at that time, so that's a huge advantage. Maybe they had to read 50 journals, which came to them in a ship maybe after 6 months. But at the British Museum, they pretty much got every journal being published at that time. Maybe a couple of hundred journals, let's say. So yes, so for them it was not that difficult. But mind you, these people were not just working on amphibians and reptiles. They were describing fish, birds, mammals. Yeah, many different groups. So they're reading a lot. In fact, John Gray, here's a philatelic link, wrote the first stamp catalog in the world. And he also claims to have thought of the idea of the postage stamp. Now, there are many people who say otherwise, but that's what he claims. Yeah. So this was the situation. But during our time meaning I'm not dead yet, but when Aaron, for instance, and we were kids or young academics, we still used to write to people, including each other, asking for reprints. This is before pre-internet days. So we had little printed postcard or an aerogram. I used to write to people. As a kid in school, wrote to Sherman Minton, who was such a big guy, and he immediately responded and sent the reprints by email and addressed to me as Professor Das. So I still have the letter. My first professor was from Sherman Minton. And so this was how people exchange publications via reprints. When article was published, we used to buy 20 or 50 or 100 off-prints of that article, which we distributed to people. And this is before scanning and PDF, which came only in the last. 20 years. Xerox was very expensive. Was extremely expensive and difficult. And even when I was in Harvard, I remember spending 1/3 my salary on making photocopies. So that was to tell you the scale of things. So some people even wrote down information rather
Wrote
than, or
down,
yes, wrote down whole papers or typed the whole paper. Edward Taylor used to type the whole papers.
and we are so much blessed.
Yes. So this is a graph I did a while back showing species described from Southern Asia over time, but ends in mid
1900.
1990s. Yeah. So it shows 3 peaks. These peaks correspond with Gray and Bunter and Boulanger. And of course, if you extend this, you would find new peaks coming up.
So as you said peak, I just wanted to know, like, that because we are talking on description of species. So sir, till date, how many species that you can remember that you have described,
I
or
can
you are
tell
a
you.
part of that team?
I will tell you later. I have to make a count.
So it's 60,
Yeah,
as I
okay.
see. I just got through the things, and I also went through another interesting piece of information that there are 5 species of herbs that were named. I think all are herbs only
Yeah.
that were, or except for one,
Okay. Yeah.
5 named after you.
Oh yeah.
So that's a feat. So
A
moving on to the
dragonfly.
next
I
one.
remember. A
Yeah,
dragonfly. I remember.
yes, yes, and that's why I remember, because 4 were like herbs and 1 dragonfly.
Yeah. I was
So
surprised.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I go on to the next slide. Yeah.
So, so one of the things about reading old literature is, of course, you go back to the original mention of the species, but there are also great distractions, such as wonderful paintings. It's an art we've forgotten. Many of these books are richly illustrated with watercolors. And mind you, at that time, they were printed in black and white, and the colors were applied by hand by different artists. So if you look at different editions of the book, you'll find the colors are different in different copies. So really, really interesting. This is one of my favorite books, Thomas Bell's monograph of the Testudinata, which has a lot of very beautiful paintings of turtles, watercolors. Next. And a much neglected person, Thomas Hardwicke, was with the Bengal Artillery of the East India Company. And I don't know what he was doing with the army, because he collected hundreds of specimens. So how do they find time to have 2 careers at the same time when we are struggling with one and complaining? So he also, organized paintings to be drawn by local artists. I tried to research, not much available on these local artists. They were probably given 5 rupees per page or something. And 1 or 2 are mentioned in botanical works, but we don't know much about their background. And eventually, these manuscripts were published by John Gray as illustrations of Indian zoology. There's no text, only the paintings. So these comprise the original descriptions of these species. And the species extend, of course, from Pakistan up to even Singapore. So although it's Indian zoology, India has a very broad definition.
Yes. Yes.
Next. And here's one example of the species everyone would know what it is from illustrations of Indian zoology. The species extremely rare in India and only maybe in the Nicobar Islands.
So what I can do is, in between, for interest, If anybody knows the answer on the name of the species, they can write down in the comment below, and let's see if you can ID it. But those who are already in the field, I will say you please refrain from answering.
Yeah,
Okay,
good
sir,
idea.
please continue.
Yeah, next. And if there are any Nepalese researchers or those working in the Himalayas would know this name, hot sun snake, racer, and many other species, birds and herbs. He was a resident of the king of Nepal. And again, what was he doing? Was he advising the king or was he collecting animals? And authored 127 papers. How did he do this? I mean, remarkable achievement. Without typewriter. Huh?
Yes.
Next. Okay, you can ask what species they are.
Okay. So there was a snake that you need to ID, and there this is you have to write the snake's name and that the top one and the bottom one. So you have to, if you want to answer chronologically, you have to write snake, the name, the top frog is this one, and the bottom frog is that one. So you have to write like this chronologically, and let's see who can get all the three correct.
Okay, the winner would get a book from me, a herpetological
Oh,
book.
so what more do you want? So winner gets an herpetology, and see, the winner would be like the first come first. So whatever I see first, many may give a right answer, but whatever we see first in the comment box that comes to us, we'll use that, and whoever gets it gets a book. That's great. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
yes. So let's look at one of the early museums. It was actually the Asiatic Society at 1 Park Street. Everyone knows this building, but nobody goes there anymore because now they deal with culture. But it was started by the Orientalist Sir William Jones. And of course, Jones was himself against killing of animals and discouraged collection. But nonetheless, animals started coming in, donated by members. And the Asiatic Society inherited a huge collection of animals, zoological specimens, which became eventually the Museum of the Zoological Survey of India. Next. And attached to the Asiatic Society was the Danish naturalist, Cantor, who stayed in Fort William, just across from Asiatic Society. And of course, he's famous for all these species, descriptions. And next, please. And the description of this species. You want to add this to your question? This species was described by Cantor.
So this is the second snake. You can also check this out if you can name the species. But anyway, I think people can see the name as well. So leave this snake. Okay, we can move on to the next.
At the same time, was Edward Bly was the curator, the first curator of the museum. Edward Bly didn't get along with Hodgson. There was some issues, like in today's world of science. Edward Bly and Hodgson they were competing. Sometimes Hodgson used to send material to the Asiatic Society, and Bly used to publish, and that made Hodgson very angry. So such things existed even at that time. But
yes,
Edward did not much field work because of poor funding. Jones didn't give him money to go out, so he could only go up to Baripur. And so he had to depend on collections from the others.
So in between, I just want to ask, sir, if I want to learn about, because many of here who have joined in may not be hardcore interested in herpetology, but many may be interested in historical aspect of herpetology. So if we really want to go through the biography or something about those authors of the yesteryears, which is the best literature you can recommend?
The easiest solution is check out the 3 volumes by Craig Adler, It's called Contributions to History of Herpetology, volumes 1, 2, 3, which gives in chronological order famous herpetologists from the past. The only criteria to be included is you have to be dead. So many famous living herpetologists are not included. So Craig's waiting for them to drop dead to include them.
And what about like somebody dies after him?
Craig's not dead yet, and maybe someone else can go on.
Oh, great. So that's a very important discussion, that you have to die to be there.
Yes,
Anyway,
included
so
in the volumes.
so to the next slide.
Yeah. So Thomas Jordan, everyone knows Jordan's this and that, but this is his portrait. Of course, he collected in the Himalayas and in the Khasi Hills, and he was actually planning a book on the Indian reptiles, like he did for the mammals and birds, but he only reached, I saw the manuscript, up to the genus Tropidonotus, which is equal to Amphiasma or Rabies in today's nomenclature, and died. And his book was never published. But his papers, many of them are still valid.
Yes.
Yeah. Next. And Blandford, of course, geologist with the GSI and author of many books. His specialty was actually mollusks, fossil mollusks. And he actually is the first person to write about the different groups of animals in the Fauna of British India series. He started a series. If you go to the next slide, I have an interesting image of that's a plate from one of Blandford's work. But if you see the colored image, it shows the activities of the Geological Survey of India. I would argue geologists have done more than zoologists at that time to further the study of zoology. So GSI, based again in Calcutta, of course, had expeditions to all these different parts of the world, old world, up to Southeast Asia and Andaman Nicobars and Africa and Middle East. And these names you think are zoologists, they are all geologists, including Stolicka and Blandford, the two Blandford brothers, who not just collected rocks, they also collected amphibians and reptiles, described species, wrote accounts. If you have read Blandford, he also writes natural history notes. So again, a remarkable achievement for that time. Next. Another name very familiar if you work in the Western Ghats or Sri Lanka, is that of Colonel Richard Beddoe. Craig looked far and wide for his image and finally got it from a descendant. So he was again an army man and who became the forestry conservator, chief assistant to the conservator, and wrote many botanical books, especially on ferns. You would think it's another Beddoe. No, it's the same Beddoe who's written vast, thick monographs on ferns, and also published on herbs, reptiles especially, and especially shield-tailed snakes in the Western Ghats. Yes. And John Anderson, supposedly supervisor of the Indian Museum, but actually he was one of the best field biologists of that time, and leading expeditions to Yunnan, leading expeditions to the Burma border, and collecting all of. So very, very interesting, hardworking person, and medical doctor too. He practiced medicine. He did surgeries in the Calcutta Medical Hospital. Can you imagine? Next. And Theobald, another geologist who also worked in India and Burma, and also made a lot of significant contributions, including catalogs of the Indian Museum holding and where he was the first one to look at the placement or allocation of the relationships of the Xenopeltidae, recognizing it as sister of the Boidae, the large constricting snakes. Yeah, next. So if you ask me who's your favorite herpetologist, I would say this gentleman. You'd say they all look alike with a long beard. Ferdinand Stolicka. He is my absolute favorite zoologist. He is Moravian, in an area which doesn't exist anymore within the Republic, Czech Republic, paleontologist, and he collected, of course, mollusks, fossils, rocks from all over India, Andaman Nicobars. When he got so tired, he went on holiday to Andaman Nicobars, and he's the most prolific contributor from there. He also collected in Burma, Malaysia, Singapore, and he was also the official naturalist to explore Yarkand in Western China. So I have examined his field notebooks. He was collecting up to the day he died, and he wrote his last entry was something like, "Not feeling well today, maybe I'll rest a bit." And then he died. He walked and went on horseback from Calcutta to Western China, and on the return, he died in Ladakh. Maybe altitude sickness, or maybe pneumonia, and he's buried in Leh, Ladakh. Maybe next time I go, I'm going to visit his grave. Next.
So before I go to the next slide, because it's very interesting that you came out and said that he's your favorite herpetologist. So can you just elaborate a bit what do you think? Because there are other famous names like Smith and all, but not at that level. But why do you think he is the famous one or the best herpetologist for you?
There are actually many people to choose from, but for me, Stolicka was an academician. He was describing very competently, writing about natural history, but the whole personality of going on horseback from across countries, across mountain passes, no trains, no airplanes those days, and collecting off horseback, staying in tents, maybe sheltering under trees, and writing descriptions even to the point of his death. What greater commitment can you show than this? I think it would be a very, very tough call to choose someone else. Okay, so here again, species curve for Andamans. Again, the biggest crest is that of Stolicka's description. And mind you, he went on a 2 weeks holiday when he got tired of academic work to the Andamans to apparently regain his health. And this is what he did. Some people never sleep. So this is Farah, this very famous person, not a very prolific scientist, but important because of his experiments with venom and for his treatment of snake bite, and especially he was a medical doctor. His book, I have one image in the next slide. Yes, Thanatophilia. There are 2 editions of this and some magnificent color paintings. If you've seen this book, you know how beautiful it is. You can't appreciate the beauty on the screen in the small size. It's a folio work. Amazing paintings and the science, and every modern scientist who study herpetologist in Southeast Asia, Asia, or in England would know this name. Malcolm Arthur Smith was a doctor, physician to the King of Thailand. King and I, if you've seen the play or read the book. But if you read the book, you would think it's a different guy because there's not a single mention of herbs, even a gecko. It's all about intrigues in the royal palace of Thailand. Malcolm never came to India, but may have changed ship, I think, in Bombay on the way to Thailand. But he did complete 3 volumes on the reptiles of this region. In the case of snakes, it was right up to Southeast Asia, mainland Southeast Asia. And he never went on to complete the amphibian volume because I think World War II came about. And then, of course, he went back to the UK. Next. So some details which you know already. So when we were growing up, even this book was not reprinted. So there was some very fragile 1931 or 35, 43 editions, which we had to handle with kids' gloves.
Yeah.
Huh? Very careful.
Kids club.
Yes, not to rip the page while turning. Next, please. And Frank Wall, another great medical doctor turned scientist. He was especially interested in snakes, anything without legs. So he, of course, his great work is The Snakes of Ceylon, now being reprinted. But he also worked on sea snakes, and there's a big monograph on that. And for Indian workers, they would know his large series of articles in JBNHS, Journal of Bombay Natural History Society, with beautiful color plates. I have one example. Next. 2 examples. Yeah, or 4 examples. So beautiful paintings. Yeah. The next. And also in BNHS, there was Charles McCann, who was publishing all kinds of natural history, but his herpetological work was very, very interesting. Again, you can see the first generation of people not just looking at taxonomy, but also looking at natural history. So Charles, unfortunately, didn't publish so much here. Then he went to New Zealand and made another career, publishing on the natural history of New Zealand lizards. But significant work across. Another favorite person for me is Thomas Annandale. I think he's many people's favorite, especially those from the ZSI, because he was the first director of the ZSI. And he came as a deputy superintendent. But apart from his herpetological contributions, he was also a limnologist at a time when nobody knew the definition of the word limnology, study of ponds and lakes. And many descriptions, natural histories he published, Burma and Malay Peninsula. And unfortunately, he died of malaria at the age of 48. So no work of South Asia would be complete without mention of Dherania Gala, who was a great worker. He was the director of the Colombo Museum. And he was a Harvard man, he was a boxer, he was a painter, archaeologist, he was everything. He worked on fish and reptiles, and worked on every kind of group, except, strangely, amphibians. Did he hate amphibians? I'm not sure. But he did work, he published one small note on Sicilians. So I have an image from one of the plates of his colored atlas. So these plates were done by him, so shows he had quite a competence in painting the Chrysopelia and the Semis Sitama. And of course, closer to time, there is Gharpure. His book, of course, is famous, and many of us as kids would refer to his work. And he also published some natural history notes. Again, an army man, huh? Maybe army is very, very good. If people here wants to visit join the army, it's a great opportunity to travel. And unless there's a war, time you have in your hand. Huh?
So because I see, now also the paramilitary and those forces, they are stationed in remote places. So they see lots of snakes and
there is at that time slowly the World and Zoological Survey in India. They were moving, you see, from the description phase to understanding distributions and understanding biogeography. So at this time, there was Sundar Lal Hora, who joined the Zoological Survey. He was an ichthyologist, but he also published on tadpoles, we know, and was even a broader zoologist trying to understand distributions and causal reasons for these distributions using animals as models. So he was one of the great thinkers of that time and to this day. Closer to this to present time is, of course, many workers, too many to mention, so I'll just mention a couple. One is Garth Underwood. He worked in India in the 1940s and went to the Caribbean, where he was professor in the university. But I was fortunate to have known him in the 80s and 90s in the British Museum. And he visited me here in Borneo, in Sabah actually, prior to his death. And very important worker on morphology and snakes. And he has, to his credit, a large number of students who he has mentored. I would hopefully be considered one of them. There's also Carl Gans, who worked on primarily as an engineer. He was an engineer, but worked on biomechanics, maybe a good combination. Herpetology and engineer. You can only be a biomechanic expert. So he worked on burrowing of snakes, and he became very interested in shield-tailed snakes of India and Sri Lanka. Published a few papers, but unfortunately he passed on before his major revision could be done. And again, another important work of Walter Offenberg. His work was on the fossil fishes, fossil snakes, but he was also he's also the author of 3 volumes on the ecology of monitor lizards. We have Komodo monitor in Indonesia, Dr. Gray's monitor in Philippines, and the Bengal monitor. Of course, Bengal monitor includes 2 species, the Varanus bengalensis and nebulosus. And again, unfortunately, he went before his work on the herpetology of Pakistan could be completed. Next. And of course, Rom Whittaker, who mentored me and many others, and in fact, most modern, I would say modern, postmodern herpetologists started off with him. And here you see him with another great man during Rom's time when he was probably a young man. His father also was a film producer, his stepfather. So Ram also started the Croc Bank and the Snake Park, started the journal Hamadryad along with Zai Whittaker, made many natural history films, and promoted many conservation causes, such as Salin Valley, very important, became a national park thanks to his lobbying, and Gahir Mata National Park. Next. And so many of them here. You want to do another quiz? How many can get everyone right?
Yeah, of course. But I think there will be a very few number of people will get it right, including me.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, I can also take part here.
Yes. So there are 3 sets of people. So how? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm towards the end of this. So how do you know about history? I urge people to read the original literature. Go to the primary source. If you don't know the language, there's Mr. Google to help you, or learn that language. Learn or ask someone, get it translated. So it's very important to learn, to read the original literature. And scientists have also left behind manuscripts, field notes, journal entries, ledger entries, museum labels of specimens. So all these are in the archive section. So go and find them and consult them, read biographies, autobiographies, even see survey routes of explorers. Sometimes they are actually available. This is a book I got, obscurely published, Journal of Tibetan Studies from Austria, on Stolicka's work. So keep on searching. You never know where you would find what you're looking for.
So, just in between, I wanted to ask you, like nowadays we have this Google and all for translating, and so when you started, like many of Cantor's paper are not in English. So, how did you deal with, because that now internet helps, but that time, how did you deal with this translation?
So I learned basics of German, French, and Latin. So
Okay,
it helps if you know these three languages. I think you have 80% of the literature covered, at least
correct.
understand the basics. And sometimes you have books like this specialist issue of Mertensiella, which is German contributions to herpetology. So it has biographies of important herpetologists who are of German extraction. So a lot of information there. And also sometimes don't look only for herpetology. For instance, I picked up this book in the British Museum shop, a catalog of like bibliography of entomological specimens. And entomologists were also collecting other things, and there is information on collectors of reptiles and amphibians and their dates, their itineraries, their correspondence in such books. So it's very important to read outside of herpetology. Next. And this is my last image. Sushil Datta in Gahir Mata, 1997, when he was in, I think, the North Orissa University at that time. So I would say, if you ask me who's done the most for herpetology, I would say Sushil Datta for this part of the world, by starting School of Herpetology, which has produced the current crop of herpetologists from South Asia. And he has, through his behavior, encouraged a lot of young people. Huh? You don't have
Always
to.
positive.
Yes. So, yeah, I'd like to dedicate this presentation to him. And of course,
Wow.
everyone knows he's a friend of mine, and I hope he's watching. Oh, no, he's not on Facebook.
No, he
Okay.
is in Facebook. He is in Facebook.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then I think Craig sent me some pictures that I use. Aaron, of course, always helpful. Alan Leviton, great historian of herpetology. Jonathan Murray, very, very knowledgeable. He was. He passed away a couple of years ago. And libraries, don't forget the Zoological Survey, Geological Survey, BNHS. There's a library in almost every big city near you. So do visit the library.
So finally, I can see you. All this time, I was not able to see you.
Didn't miss
I was
much.
just, I was I was all through seeing the presentation. So what we can do, sir, because thank you so much that you gave us that extra bit of time as well. So we will take. There are lots of highs and hellos. So sir, if you can hello everyone at once, so everybody gets the hello. So so those who have written highs and hellos, this is a cumulative answer to all of you, and hello everyone from me as well. So then we go to specific question, and there are lots of great thing being said about you. So I'm just scrolling down, and everyone is saying something great. And then, okay, Priyanka Kadam, is it a question or something? Let me see. You can see it on the screen. Remarkable to know the rich species knowledge that were document. Great to know some of the tidbits of Indraneil Dasji work. Bengal in detail. Okay, that was not a question. Thank you, Priyanka. Uh, okay, Gaurav says the snake that you showed, the one snake we had, he says reticulated python. But we have to have three answers, right? So Gaurav again says, uh, because you are one to decide the winner. He says bullfrog, and the lower one is common toad. Is he right?
Yes, he's the winner.
He is the winner. So Gaurav, you are getting a book, and we clap for you. And you are getting the book once Sir is here, and it's my responsibility to get the book to you. I'll take care of that. So then there are many answers below that, but sorry, because Shonak Pal says reticulated python, Hoplobatrachus tigrinus, Dottophrinus melanostrictus. So yeah, it was right, but we had this, and we are done. But thank you for the interest. And then Shariar says, "Hello Neil, great to see you here. You have been such an inspiration for Hardwicke. If you okay, if possible, would field experience in Bangladesh? Would you like to share some field experience in Bangladesh?"
Yeah, I have limited experience in Sylhet and in Chattogram and in Cox's Bazar. I'll say that wherever I go, the most remarkable thing I remember is people would cook a meat, fish, vegetable, and then say, আর বেশি কিছু করতে পারিনি. More. So, amazing time, great food and hospitality. And after eating so much, how can you expect people to do field work? Yeah. So, all the best,
And
Sharon.
on that line, I just wanted to ask you, like, because you have a lots of field experience in different places, can you tell me one of the most interesting or funny story that you have ever come across?
Herpetology, huh?
The one of that you remember, the first time anybody asks you, can you tell me a story of your field experience? What is that story that comes to your mind?
Okay, one is getting arrested. So, arrested for trespassing in someone's private property at the age of 14. And I had my cousin brother who's 11. And eventually they took pity on us and let us go. But the funny thing is, the owner of the area is also our friend. So, the security guard, of course, didn't know who we were. And they arrested us and locked us up in a room. So there
So
was that.
Debayon also gave a partial answer, and then Ashish also gave the answer. Uh, his presentation. Jigme says, "I'll copy. It will be available on YouTube." Okay. Then it's lots of questions. Information shared. Thank you,
Check
sketches.
the easy ones.
Can you tell one of the easiest experiences with some species which you found and made you real Abrojol asks, maybe this is of some interest. Sir, can you tell us one of the earliest experience from the field, some species which you found and made you really excited and happy? Almost all the species, I think.
Yeah, the funny thing is, when you go to look for a species, you won't find it, but you will find something else. You'll agree, most herpetologists will agree. And then you'll find what you're looking for at a different place or at a different time, or someone else will find it for you. So it's hardly ever trying to find something and getting that, except it may be Biphoides. Biphoides megalana, not known for many years. We actually specifically, when looking, almost gave up. And then Duwaki, I remember from Nehu, Northeastern Hill University, said, "Hey, what's this frog?" And it was an Amalops on a rock face. So he got the Amalops, and I looked with a flashlight. You won't believe, one maybe half in cm crack, horizontal crack on the rock behind the Amalops were 2 pairs of eyes, or maybe 4 pairs of eyes. So these toads were adapted for squeezing into the tiniest cracks. And this is how Buphoides meghalanus was redescribed or rediscovered. Huh? And the second issue was how to get them out. So fortunately, Duwaki smokes. So he started a little fire around that crack, and those 2 animals jumped running out. So yeah, that was one of the few cases.
One of the here also we can learn something positive out of negative things, like smoking can kill, but smoking can find you frogs as well.
Yes, yes.
So here, Gaurav says, "Respected sir, I want to ask why, amongst reptile, why only turtle lost their teeth and evolved into a beak?"
Why, we don't know, but the first turtle from the Jurassic had no teeth, or one of some of the earliest turtles had no teeth. So maybe they had a diet of some soft things like sponges, but teeth, like many birds, for instance, don't have teeth and they do all right. So maybe their ancestors didn't have teeth.
So this is
You want an answer to that?
how has it helped making you a walking encyclopedia of herpetology?
I don't know about that, but I'll tell you. I told you the Asiatic Society was at 1 Park Street. I grew up at a house on 93 Park Street. So that's 3 blocks walk. So I used to walk to ZSI every day and bother the people there. And fortunately, they at that time there was S. Biswas, Sada Biswas, and DP Sanyal. They treated me as a staff at that age. And I was always part of their community for any kind of get-together, and full access to all specimens. And of course, I used to help them clean up collections. I was like an unofficial volunteer. And yeah, certainly a huge part of growing up was the acceptance from scientists, established scientists. Biswas and Sanyal, of course, the authors of so many papers on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and very good people. And
so this is another question from Shubham. Sir, with regards to your publication on pseudocruciger, description talks about W-shaped marking on the mandible. In which other frog can we find such structure? What is the significance?
Thank you. Most amphibians, I think, have a W-shaped structure. Sometimes it's highly pronounced, like in the genus Limnonectus. The males, the 2 cusps are so developed that, although it has not been observed, people have speculated it's used in male combat. But even in many others, there's at least a weak cusp on the lower jaw, and this may help in grasping the prey, especially for prey that are very large and the lack of teeth. The cusp, W-shaped cusp, and on the maxilla, the very sharp tip may help in better grasp.
So this is a more of a descriptive question. I think it needs more like it's a like how to write or something like that. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Orijit Chattopadhyay, can you please give some insight about the points we should focus? to write literature reviews. Okay, so literature review or any reviews, you have to, of course, read all the important works ever done, and then take a break. Take a break from that task. Otherwise, you'll be repeating what's been said, and then come back to the problem. And different people do it in different ways, but I would take a blank sheet of paper and write in bulleted points what are the most important things to write about: A, B, C, D, E, F. Then let's group them together in terms of what's related to what. Then start the writing, beginning and the end, maybe write last, and write the body first. What are the most important things to write? And regardless of what you write, review or any first observation, I suggest the beginning and the end should be very strong. If the beginning is not strong, then people will not read the paper. And no matter how simple what you write is, the end should be a recapitulation of what you've written, the most important things. So that is my experience, but others may have a different idea.
Tapir says, respected professor, would you kindly share your information about turtles in regard to Nepal and the presence of geochromic simultaneity?
I am unfortunately, thank you, Tapil. I am unfortunately not very familiar with the current situation of turtles. I know there were some old records in passing in some literature. They would say we have ABCD, but there is no voucher specimen for some, and yet it's found in adjacent parts of India, Oxbow Lakes, which of course very vulnerable. So maybe Chitwan and other places would be a good areas to search, because in such areas in India like Kaziranga, that at least used to be during my time the stronghold of Egyptians, which, if you want to know, my favorite topic.
Collection and proper curation plays a critical role in many of the example you highlighted. How you think this idea is changing in modern days, especially with limited support for this purpose? Asked by Faisal Ali.
Thank you, Faisal. Faisal's my colleague and good friend here. So he's a specialist on bats and mammals. So this is a very serious issue. Collection is easy. We can collect. Killing is even more easy. But where do we put them? I mean, we very seldom think about such things. How do we curate? Mind you, we are thinking of infinity. We're going to keep these specimens forever. So how are we going to do that? We need institutional support. And we know in Malaysia, people are still struggling with the National Naturalist Museum. In India, the Natural Museum of Natural History, we know what happened, went up in smoke a few years ago. We have the Zoological Survey of India. It's a tough work to maintain, expensive. So at this point of time, I would say it's a government commitment. No matter how committed scientists are, we're kind of helpless unless we really lobby with the government to allocate more resources, including staff, training, bottles and bottles of alcohol, air condition building, which is very important to be fireproof. Important collections in the last 10 years have been burnt to the ground, including the one in Brazil and for the Indian Naturalist Museum. Many museums, like the museum in Selangor, was bombed during World War II. Many old German museums were also destroyed. So these are important issues which we can only recommend. Maybe when we become very senior academics, people will listen to us.
Thank you. We actually we had the plan of the program for 1 hour, but we are way over. We are like almost doubling the time. So thank you so much. I know the question will keep on coming, but if there are some question you can pass on in the comment, and I can also contact to sir if there are some interesting ones, and get his views on that. And thank you so much, sir, for giving the time, and all of you who have been listening patiently for past more than 1.5 hours. Thank you so much, and I hope that this was little productive in this lockdown scenario. And I hope to bring such more in coming days. Once again, so you stay back. You just don't disconnect. I will come back to you. I
Yeah.
just switch off the live broadcast. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening to that. Thank you again.